The streets of Birmingham, England were filled with people, all gathered to say their final goodbyes to the legendary rocker, Ozzy Osbourne. The news of his passing had touched millions, and this moment was not just about remembering a musician, it was about honoring someone who had become a symbol of rebellion, creativity, and raw human emotion. Ozzy's funeral had already taken place, and while the media captured the big moments, the crowd, the music, and the emotional tributes, there were many things the cameras didn't catch. There were personal gestures, emotional reactions, and unexpected moments that only those who were present could fully understand. These hidden parts of the story made the farewell even more powerful, even more human. What truly happened that day wasn't just a ceremony, it was something deeper, something unforgettable. This wasn't just the farewell of another celebrity. It was personal, intense, emotional, and for many, deeply surprising. Ozzy Osbourne passed away on July 22, 2025, at the age of 76. He died peacefully at his home in Buckinghamshire, surrounded by the people who mattered most to him, his wife Sharon and their children. According to the family's official statement, he had been fighting multiple health problems for a long time. He had Parkinson's disease, spinal complications, and many other issues that come with age. His final days were quiet, calm, and filled with love. There were no medical emergencies, no unexpected accidents, just the slow and peaceful end of a life lived with intensity and passion. The family made sure that those last moments were spent privately, with no cameras, no reporters, and no chaos. Ozzy had been struggling with his health for many years. Back in 2020, he told the world that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It was a brave and difficult confession. That news came after a bad fall in 2019 which damaged his spine and forced him into surgery. After that, he spent a lot of time in recovery. Even though he fought hard and went through many painful sessions of physical therapy, his mobility stayed limited. By the beginning of 2025, it became clear that he needed full-time care. He could no longer walk on his own and was mostly in a wheelchair. People close to him shared later that his condition became much worse in the last 2 months of his life. It was during this time, in June, that he quietly began to say goodbye to some of his oldest friends, fellow musicians, and collaborators. It was his way of preparing for the end, not with sadness, but with gratitude and peace. Even as his health declined, Ozzy tried to stay strong for his fans. On July 5, 2025, just a few weeks before his death, he made one last public appearance. It was a farewell concert in Birmingham, the city where he was born and raised. Though he performed while seated, the emotion in his voice and the energy in the air were undeniable. This wasn't just a concert, it was a statement. Ozzy wanted everyone to know that he was leaving the stage on his own terms. The concert wasn't about technical perfection. It was about heart. And even though some people doubted whether he would make it through the show, he did. That night became a beautiful memory for everyone who was there. It was a goodbye wrapped in music, wrapped in love. Before he passed away, Ozzy had been clear about how he wanted his funeral to be. He had said in interviews many times that he didn't want people crying and being too serious. He wanted people to laugh, to drink, to remember the good times, and to play Black Sabbath songs loud and proud. He joked with his family that if anyone turned his funeral into a sad, boring event, he'd come back and haunt them for being too dull. Sharon, his wife, had confirmed this in interviews before. Ozzy wanted his life celebrated, not mourned. According to people close to the family, Ozzy even helped plan parts of his own funeral before he died. He picked out the songs he wanted to be played. Some were his own classics, while others were tracks from the musicians who had inspired him when he was young. He didn't want a traditional church ceremony, and he definitely didn't want long, emotional speeches that sounded like something from a public relations script. His message to his family was simple: keep it real. No fake tears, no drama, just honesty and love. After his death, the Osbourne family didn't immediately share the news with the public. First, they informed close friends, former bandmates, and the people who had worked with Ozzy for many years. It was only later in the day that news outlets picked up the story, after the family released an official statement. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, fans began gathering outside his home in Buckinghamshire. Some brought flowers, some held vinyl records, and some simply stood in silence. The internet lit up with tributes from musicians, actors, fans, and even world leaders, all remembering the impact Ozzy had made on music and culture. Behind the scenes, Sharon started working with city officials in Birmingham to organize a public tribute. She knew how much the city meant to her husband. He was born there, started his band there, and it shaped him into the man he became. Sharon made it clear that this tribute had to be done right. But at the same time, she and the rest of the family kept the private details of Ozzy's passing out of the public eye. They respected his wishes and focused only on music, memories, and meaning. In the days right after his death, a private family-only service was held. No pictures were shared. No news articles were written about it. Everything was kept quiet, respectful, and in line with Ozzy's wishes. His family followed every instruction he had given. They made sure his goodbye would be about love, not publicity. Then came July 30th, 2025. The city of Birmingham came to a complete stop. What had been planned for days finally came to life: a public funeral procession to honor Ozzy Osbourne. The route of the procession was carefully chosen by the family and included places that had been important in Ozzy's life. It began in Aston, the neighborhood where he grew up, and moved through the streets of Birmingham. One of the final stops was Broad Street, where a bench with his name faces the Black Sabbath Bridge, a place that had already become a kind of shrine for fans. People started lining up early in the morning, long before the procession began. By the time the black hearse carrying Ozzy's body appeared, thousands of people had gathered. They stood in silence, holding signs, some wearing t-shirts with Ozzy's face, others simply holding hands with tears in their eyes. But even though many people were emotional, the mood wasn't only sad, it was a celebration, just as Ozzy had wanted. People clapped, shouted his name, and played his music from portable speakers. The whole event felt like a concert and a farewell all at once. The local police made sure the route was clear. Roads were closed to traffic so the procession could move without interruption. A group of mounted police officers led the way, followed by a single black hearse. It moved slowly so everyone could get a good look. People tossed flowers onto the road. Some threw small gifts. One man wrapped up an old pair of boots with a note that read, "You walked with us. Now rest." A woman held up a worn vinyl record of Blizzard of Oz and cried quietly. In several areas, the city had built temporary viewing platforms so more people could see the procession. One of the largest was near Villa Park, the stadium where Ozzy's favorite football team, Aston Villa, plays. There, fans sang the team anthem while a brass band played a slow version of Iron Man. It was a haunting and beautiful moment, a true salute from his hometown. As the procession reached the city center, the crowd suddenly began to chant Ozzy's name. It wasn't planned. No one told them to do it. It just happened naturally. One voice started, then another, and soon, thousands of people were chanting together. The sound bounced off the buildings and filled the streets. That moment didn't feel like a celebrity's funeral. It felt like the farewell of a legend, a hero, someone who had lived among the people and never truly left them. Streetlights along the route were dimmed. Large screens were set up, showing videos of Ozzy performing in the 1970s and early 2000s. It reminded everyone of how far he had come, from the small streets of Birmingham to the world stage and back again. He never forgot where he came from, and his fans never forgot what he gave them. The Osbourne family did not walk in the procession. Instead, they followed the hearse in a line of dark vehicles with tinted windows. They stayed quiet and distant, choosing not to make themselves the center of attention. It was a decision made out of respect for Ozzy, for the fans, and for the moment itself. They wanted the city to have its own space to grieve, to remember, and to celebrate. That day will be remembered for a long time. Not because it was a huge celebrity event, but because it was genuine. It was real. It was exactly what Ozzy would have wanted. People came together not just to say goodbye, but to thank him for the music, the madness, the honesty, and the heart. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just a rock star. He was a force of nature. And even in death, he brought people together one last time. Behind the scenes, there were other details that made this day even more special. Some local schools gave students the day off so they could attend. Local shops stayed closed, not out of obligation, but out of respect. Street artists painted murals overnight with Ozzy's face, quotes from his lyrics, and symbols from his iconic career. One mural near Aston simply read, "Thank you, Ozzy. We'll carry the noise for you." That noise, that energy, that legacy is what Ozzy leaves behind. And as the hearse finally disappeared from view, the crowd didn't disperse immediately. They stayed for hours. Some sang. Some cried. Some just stood still, letting the moment settle in their hearts. For them, Ozzy Osbourne was never just a musician. He was a voice that helped them through dark times, a sound that gave them freedom, and a presence that felt like family. And now, even though he's gone, his music still echoes in the hearts of millions. His laugh, his words, his madness, they live on. Not in silence, but in full volume. Just the way he wanted it. The people came in thousands. They walked, waited, stood still, and whispered. They had one purpose, to say goodbye. It wasn't a royal farewell, and it wasn't an official state event. But it felt just as big. In the city of Birmingham, fans, friends, and ordinary people gathered to remember someone who had shaped their lives with his music. This was the final farewell to Ozzy Osbourne, the legendary musician and lead singer of Black Sabbath. All along the route where the funeral procession passed, people stood quietly. Some cried, some sang softly, and others just watched, lost in thought. No one led them. No grand speeches were made. The people organized themselves. This was not about being seen, it was about feeling something deeply. At the beginning and the end of the route, small stalls popped up. Vendors were selling t-shirts, posters, and little souvenirs with Ozzy's image. Some people criticized this, saying it turned the funeral into a market. But most people didn't care. They wanted something to remember the day. Many said this would be their only chance to feel close to Ozzy one last time, and they didn't want to leave empty-handed. As the procession moved closer to the famous bridge named after Black Sabbath, something changed. The shouting stopped. People grew quiet. Some lit candles, even though it was daytime. Others sang softly, old songs that Ozzy once performed. The city allowed flowers to pile up along the sidewalks, and the workers were told not to clean them up for at least 2 days. It didn't look neat, but that messiness made it real. This wasn't a carefully controlled tribute. It was emotional, loud at times, and deeply personal. This was a city mourning in its own way, through music, memories, and raw emotion. At the end of the public ceremony, when most people had said their goodbyes, Ozzy's family stepped into a moment that was just for them. They walked to the Black Sabbath Bridge, a special place in Birmingham where Ozzy had been honored years ago with a bench and a plaque. It had started as a tribute from fans, but the city later made it official. For the Osbourne family, this place held deep meaning. It was more than just a landmark, it was a symbol of everything Ozzy had given and everything they had lost. Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's wife, arrived first. She was dressed all in black. Around her neck, she wore a single strand of pearls. Her eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses. In one hand, she held purple flowers. She looked calm but walked slowly, with security nearby. Sharon had been through it all with Ozzy, his health struggles, his public mistakes, his recoveries. This was her private goodbye, and it showed in every movement she made. Their children followed behind her. Jack, Kelly, Amy, and Lewis were each dressed simply, but with care. Every piece of clothing or accessory seemed to have meaning. Kelly wore round, purple-tinted glasses, just like the kind her father used to wear. Jack wore a silver cross on his coat. Amy had a small brooch shaped like a bat, and Lewis wore a black tie with tiny purple skulls. Nothing was random. Every detail said something about who Ozzy was and what he meant to them. When they reached the bench, they formed a quiet half-circle. No one spoke. Sharon stepped forward first. She placed the flowers gently on the bench, then took off her sunglasses. She stood in silence, and her body visibly trembled. She reached out, touching the bench's backrest, and kept her hand there for several seconds. It was a simple moment, but it held years of memories and pain. This was not a rehearsed gesture. It looked like something she had imagined over and over in her mind but hadn't been able to do until now. Next was Jack. He stepped up quietly and placed a folded piece of paper on the bench. He didn't say anything and didn't look back as he walked away. According to people close to the family, it was a personal letter to his father. Jack had spoken many times about his relationship with Ozzy. It was sometimes messy, often intense, but full of love. That letter was his way of finding peace. Kelly followed. She stayed near Sharon until that point, then sat down next to the flowers. She didn't speak either. She just leaned forward and touched the wood of the bench. After a few minutes, she whispered something only she could hear, stood up, and returned to her family. There were no tears on her face, but her expression was heavy with grief. Amy and Lewis stepped forward after her, each placing their own quiet tribute. No one gave speeches. No one asked for attention. The entire family moment lasted around 10 minutes, and then they turned to leave. Security moved with them, keeping a respectful distance. But just before walking away, Sharon looked back one last time. That glance was caught by cameras, and it became one of the most talked about moments of the day. It said more than words could ever say. It was a quiet, powerful goodbye. The family didn't speak to the press. They didn't wave at fans or stop for photos. That moment at the bench was not for the world. It was for them. And somehow, even with all the cameras around, they protected that privacy. They made that goodbye theirs. But there was something else, something most people didn't notice right away. In the days after the funeral, photos began to spread online. People looked more closely, and they noticed a small gold chain around Sharon Osbourne's neck. Hanging from it was a wedding ring. But it wasn't just any ring. According to family insiders, this ring wasn't from their wedding in 1982. It was from their vow renewal ceremony in 2017. That year had been one of the most difficult for Ozzy and Sharon. Their marriage was tested by public scandals, and they had temporarily separated. But they came back together, renewing their vows in a small, private ceremony in Las Vegas. That second ring came to represent more than just love. It represented survival, forgiveness, and the strength to stay together through everything. By wearing that ring openly on the day of the funeral, Sharon sent a silent message. She didn't speak about it, didn't point to it, but she didn't hide it either. And that made it even more meaningful. It reminded everyone watching that their bond had lasted through decades of ups and downs. It endured until the very end. Friends of the family said Sharon had planned this quietly from the moment Ozzy died. She had told someone close to her that it was the only thing that would help her get through the funeral. Holding that ring close was her way of keeping part of Ozzy with her. She didn't want to speak to the crowd, didn't want to walk behind the coffin, and didn't want to pose for cameras. But the ring was non-negotiable. It was her personal anchor. Another moment that caught attention was the way Jack supported his mother throughout the day. He stayed close to her, walking beside her, guiding her by the arm when needed. In one clip, he adjusted her coat as the wind blew. In another, he placed his hand gently above hers when she stopped walking, silently offering strength. Friends later said that Jack had moved into a guest house near the family home during Ozzy's final weeks. He handled many responsibilities after the death, speaking with city officials, organizing the procession, and helping his siblings. He did it not because he had to, but because he knew Sharon needed him. Kelly, though visibly emotional, stayed a bit further back during much of the event. Cameras caught her face, and she looked hollow, worn out by sadness. She didn't speak to anyone and didn't post anything online that day. The next day, she finally shared something, a photo of an old microphone with a caption, "Silence says more." Fans understood what she meant. It was a tribute to the father who gave her both life and a name in the world of music. Altogether, the gold chain, the vow renewal ring, Jack's quiet support, Sharon's silence, these things created a powerful story. It wasn't told through speeches or media interviews. It was told through gestures, symbols, and quiet moments. And it reached people in a way words never could. After the funeral ended, tributes poured in from around the world. Musicians, fans, and public figures all shared what Ozzy Osbourne had meant to them. It was like the world paused to remember a man who had changed music forever. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's longtime bandmate in Black Sabbath, called him irreplaceable. He posted an old photo of them backstage and said they had talked just a few days before Ozzy's death. Geezer Butler, the band's bassist, stayed silent that day, choosing to grieve in private. Later, he posted a thank you message to fans for keeping Ozzy's legacy alive. Others in the rock and metal world shared their own tributes. James Hetfield from Metallica said Ozzy was the blueprint for everything they did. Axl Rose, usually private, wrote about the first time he saw Black Sabbath as a teenager and how it changed his life. Lars Ulrich said Ozzy's death felt like the end of an entire era in heavy music. Back in Birmingham, the mayor honored Ozzy's cultural and civic contributions. The city council even announced a permanent mural would be painted in Aston, near the beginning of the funeral route. Fans left candles, letters, and photos at the Black Sabbath Bridge. Even after the events ended, city workers were told not to remove any tributes for days. All around the world, fans created their own events. In Los Angeles, people gathered at the Rainbow Bar and Grill, where Ozzy had spent many nights. They played his music and lit candles. In Tokyo, fans displayed hand-drawn portraits outside a record store. In São Paulo, graffiti artists painted a giant mural with Ozzy's face and lyrics from Crazy Train. But inside the Osbourne family, there was silence. Sharon didn't give interviews. The children didn't go on talk shows. According to those close to them, this was planned. They had nothing more to say. The public had seen enough. Their grief needed space and privacy. Still, one final moment remained. Insiders said the family would soon hold a private ceremony just for them. Not in front of fans, not for the cameras. This time, it would be quiet and small. It would be held at a private chapel near their home in Buckinghamshire. No reporters. No public announcements. Only close family and trusted friends would be there. Ozzy had asked for this before he died. He didn't want a second funeral filled with formal speeches or reporters. He wanted something honest, quiet, and full of love. Sharon is making sure that's exactly what he gets. At the private service, Jack might read from Ozzy's favorite book, The Prophet. Kelly may sing part of Changes, a song they once performed together. Amy is expected to leave a handwritten letter or small personal item with the casket. Lewis, who avoids the spotlight, is staying close to Sharon and helping with the planning. The burial will take place quietly on private land. Ozzy had always said he didn't want to be buried in a public cemetery. He wanted a peaceful place where his family could visit without crowds or tourists. This land near their home will be his final resting place. No filming will be allowed. No cameras, no social media posts. This rule is strict. The family wants this last goodbye to belong to them alone. After years of living in the spotlight, they are choosing to grieve in private. And that might be the most powerful tribute of all. Ozzy Osbourne gave the world unforgettable music, wild performances, and a life full of emotion and meaning. But in the end, his goodbye was simple, personal, and deeply human. The funeral may be over, but the echoes of his life will live on in songs, in hearts, and in the silence he left behind.